Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Modern Customer Podcast. I am your host, Blake Morgan. Today, we are talking with Christian Mitchell, the Executive Vice President and Chief Customer Officer at Northwestern Mutual. Today, we're talking about his Chief Customer Officer role, how customer experience works at Northwestern Mutual. We're talking about their new financial planning platform and why it's important to work on financial literacy for all. I know you'll enjoy our podcast. Let's get to it. Christian, welcome to the Modern Customer Podcast. Where are you calling in from today?
It's great to be here. I'm in our offices, Brookfield Place in Manhattan.
Oh, you are in Manhattan proper. That's pretty awesome. How's New York going these days?
It's beautiful. It's a gorgeous day out there. I'm based in Milwaukee. I have a big team in New York, though, so I'd love to make it out here, feel the energy of the city.
Absolutely. New York was my home for 5 years. I lived in what they call Hell's Kitchen, which it was actually very lovely. It really wasn't like Hell's Kitchen, a lot of good restaurants. So if you just walk west, you'll just hit my old apartment. Today we're
You've got to give me
talking
some recommendations.
Unfortunately, this was so long ago. I don't know if any of them are still there. The great thing about New York is you basically walk in down any street and you'll hit an amazing restaurant, and it's all about that discovery. So let's talk about your role at Northwestern Mutual. For my audience that don't know you, can you just tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to do this role of Chief Customer Officer?
Yeah, so I have a varied and interesting background. I think I've touched all aspects of Northwestern Mutual's business at one point or another. I have an investment background, so I started doing private equity deals. I went over and led our corporate strategy group, did some corporate development, and I got really interested in FinTech when I was in corporate development. So I was on Betterment's board for a period of time, did the acquisition of LearnVest, and then started our corporate VC effort. And by really looking at the fintechs, I just became obsessed with client experience and what it means and what it can do to companies. I then ran our wealth management business, so I got some real experience with our products. And then since then, I've been chief customer officer, which in many regards has allowed me to like synthesize all of these various viewpoints that I've gathered during my career.
So fintech is such a cool space. There's been so much disruption in finance in the last 10 years. It's absolutely incredible. There have been so many points in the last 10 years. You've had to move really fast. In the last 3 years, you've had to move very fast. So how do you continue to move at a brisk enough pace to stay up with the pace of technology disruption?
Yes, so like fintech and disruption in financial services, I think is like such a fascinating thing because financial services is not a winner takes all game. So there's room for lots of different players in the ecosystem. And what we find is some of the most successful models are really the models that can partner, can create platforms that bring the best of the incumbent financial services providers with the startup. So that's really what we are endeavoring to do through the investments we make, through partnerships. But I think if it comes down to like the basic question of how you keep up, I think one of the most important things for incumbent financial services companies to do is to change the talent. You need some of like what I would call the legacy talent, to understand how the systems work, understand our products, understand regulation, but to then go out aggressively in the market and bring in people from startups, people that have, kind of customer first DNA, and then that mixing of kind of legacy and new. I think it just creates something so powerful that really allows big financial services companies like us to keep pace and even innovate relative to some of the fintechs.
Can you just talk about how you define customer experience now at Northwestern Mutual?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. So if one were to look at a dictionary definition of customer experience, it would be something like, the sum total of all touch points and how that helps, how that creates a feeling or a sense of affinity with the customer. When I think about customer experience, I really think about what are we solving for? Customer experience isn't just like an end in and of itself. It needs to drive towards something. And so for us, Customer experience means making our clients better off financially, having worked with us relative to anyone else. We want to create that ecosystem, the nudges, the education, the right product bundles, such that 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, and that is actually the duration of the client relationships we have, that we've made them better off financially. So that's the goal and the beating heart of client experience, customer experience when we talk about it at Northwestern Mutual.
Right. That's really smart because it is all about solving problems for the customer. Can you talk about the financial planning aspect of what you do? You have so many customers, such different needs. You're trying to scale that with technology. How do you do it all? And what is the approach to financial planning?
Financial planning is so critically important, and I think most consumers know that on some level. But I think for financial services providers, it's so critical because the history of the industry has been very transactional. Here's an insurance policy. Here's the latest hot fund. Let's get in on this IPO. Financial planning looks at that in a completely different way. Let's come to you, customer, on your terms. Let's understand what your hopes, dreams, fears are. And then let's come together. Let's create a plan together that helps you achieve all of those. And done well, it creates such a sense of like affinity and intimacy and provides such a platform for ongoing engagement with that end client. It's absolutely central to our go to market, and it's such a powerful way of interacting with clients, and it's something that can be so incredibly like digitally enabled and digitally extended across all platforms.
What financial planning tools and resources do you generally make available to customers? And can they use their phone or their iPad to do it?
Yeah, so financial planning is so critical to us that we actually created our own financial planning software. We wanted it to be customized to our business model, to our advisors, to our clients. And so that is really the linchpin of everything, the engagement platform, the data gathering platform. And it's a really powerful piece of software because our advisors can use it, but also there's so much client facing kind of friendliness, for lack of a better word. So today, so many of the financial plans that just a consumer might get, they make a lot of sense when the advisor explains it. The client takes it home and it's like completely nonsensical. Like, we want to create a financial plan that's really understandable and digestible for clients. And so that's really the heart of it. But what makes it come to life is then extending that financial plan across our mobile app. So if you're a client, you've been in your advisor's office 2 weeks ago, you got a financial plan, you can log in on your mobile app, you can see all of your goals that you came up with in that financial planning session, and then actually track your progress against them. So the financial plan becomes more of a living, breathing, ongoing activity as opposed to like a point in time piece of analysis. So all that, the plan really extends itself to all of the touch points that we have with our client mobile, our desktop website, interactions with the advisor. So that tool is everywhere.
So because you have all of this data, because your clients are interfacing with you via technology, I would imagine you know a lot, Christian, about your customers and looking at the data. Even just thinking about the household, like I think about my own household, and I mean, the way that financial literacy is, diced up in my house is probably very different than in your house. And who usually, like, one spouse will just manage the finances. Maybe the other one wants to know, but not too much. So just tell me about your process of looking at all these insights and how you make sense of it and if it's helpful for you.
Yeah. So one of the most powerful, and again, I'm going to underscore it, I mentioned it earlier, one of the most powerful aspects of financial planning is we gather so much data. And it's not only data like you're aggregating your accounts and monthly income or assets. We understand your hopes and dreams. Like, where do you want to send your kids to college? Do you think you're going to have more kids? Do you foresee increased medical expenses going forward? So we have this like treasure trove of data, and I think frankly we're just barely starting to scratch the surface of that. But I think one of the things that makes it really powerful is we are a mutual company. So our clients own us. And so it's not as though we have this beautiful incentive alignment when it comes to client data. We're not leveraging this data to just make more money at the expense of our clients. We leverage our clients' data to actually make them better off financially. So this virtuous cycle is really what we hope to implement in the years to come.
Could you paint the picture of where most of your time goes? Is it running the contact centers? Is it like setting up a customer experience operation? What does that look like? Paint the picture for us.
Yeah, so I think there are really two big areas of my effort. So the biggest area and likely the most important is really cultural change management. And that is how we talk to our board, how I talk to my peers on the executive team, leaders throughout the organization, such that they understand what client experience is, how important it is, where we're going, and the impact that it has. So that's an ongoing effort. That's not a single employee town hall or something. I mean, it takes a long time to do that education. So that's a big part of my job. The other part of my job is execution against that. So all of engineering, design, digital product, innovation, data, as well as the kind of the client experience strategy and client insights all report up to me. And so I have this unique opportunity to not only set the strategy and do the change management, but then kind of like muster the army of people that are going to go forth and actually execute on it. And there's an element of just like hardcore execution, but there's also this element of we have so many different activities going on. How do you really string those together in a way that's very cohesive, such you're not just building lots of kind of like standalone applications, but like they make sense cohesively. Like the total is much greater than the sum of the parts. So I spend a lot of time thinking about like that totality of the system.
Christian, do you spend much time thinking about the future of customer experience, or do you focus more on what's happening now with your current customers?
I think about it all the time. I think about it all the time, and I think about it less along the lines of what's going to happen in banking or what's going to happen in insurance, but more like how are consumer expectations going to change, and how do
Yeah.
the companies of the future really execute? I pay a lot of attention to the Acorns and Robinhoods of the world. Some of those fintechs are a little on the ropes right now. But what I think is amazing and fascinating about them is their client acquisition. They are just amazing at onboarding tens of millions of clients. I think long term that gives them a real competitive edge. And so as I think about the future, I think about client acquisition. How early can we acquire clients? What is that client acquisition package going to look like? How are consumers' lives going to be different? Will people be taking sabbaticals, or will people have 5 different careers, or will retirement even be a thing in 20 years? And how does that impact the way we go to market?
That's interesting to think about all these different aspects of your customer that you seem not to be affected by at all, but you are thinking about it because obviously money affects everybody in the world, everybody listening and watching, and you're thinking about your relationship with your customer and how you help them manage their money, which might change.
hmm And it's natural for us because we have clients. I mean, our client average client duration is decades. We literally measure it in decades, and so we can take this wonderfully long term approach. And I think it puts us in a position better than most companies to really think about that long term future.
Right, because your industry is very different. I mean, if you have a relationship with a customer for 30 years, that's very different than a customer who signs up for a one-off, experience. You are building long-term relationships that hopefully they won't switch. What do you do when they try and leave? Or do you try and keep them, or do you just let them churn and let them go?
Oh, we always try. We always try to keep them. We that is where our advisors really are important because that's really how we go to market, and so they have a lot of those intimate relationships with clients, such that they can help dissuade those clients from leaving. But interestingly enough, as we look at persistency or our churn rates, we have an excellent track record of maintaining our clients, um, which on one hand is really amazing, and I feel good about. On the other hand, though, it's a little bit scary because I think if we were to find ourselves in a situation where churn was really, really increasing, In that scenario, it may be too late. And so we can take comfort in our the metrics as they are today, but I think we have to continually be worried and skeptical and suspicious in order to make sure that we don't hit that tipping point.
Well, speaking of churn, one of the big questions that leaders like you are faced with is, how do I even measure customer experience? What does that look like? So would you be able to share with us how you measure success? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we measure success really, I would say, across three rough dimensions, and I'll give you a metric across each of the three, though may not necessarily be, the most important metric, but it's indicative. So we certainly want, kind of in the first instance, like every company out there, we want the customer experience to be nice, to be wonderful and delightful. So we're regularly looking at NPS or CSAT, whether that's for the entire client experience or more kind of like transactional, trigger-based tracking to make sure that customers like what they're doing. So that's one element of customer experience, very like immediate. Second is like kind of the long-term strategic execution. So I mentioned this earlier in our conversation. We measure the power of our client experience by, are our clients actually better off financially? Now, there's obviously a lot of things that go into that, but that is ultimately the litmus test of our client experience. So are we executing on our mission to free Americans from financial anxiety? So that's the second dimension. The third dimension is, we're for profit. We want to make money. So lastly, we look at revenue per household. And so is that client experience helping us, cross sell, upsell, and penetrate those households more deeply? So those are kind of the three dimensions at which we look at it. Delight, are we executing against kind of the bigger societal mission? And are we driving bottom line improvement for the enterprise?
Do you find that it's challenging to get people to fill out those surveys, those net promoter surveys? I mean, so many customers have survey fatigue, and is net promoter score that effective? Would you say it is, that it's still a good gauge?
I think net promoter score is powerful. It on a standalone basis, I don't know if it's all that great. You really have to append it to a lot of those other data points that I was sharing, and then I think it does give you some insights. People do have survey fatigue, so you just have to get really creative. We'll go out and ask, kind of in a concierge way, ask certain clients to participate in kind of a broad kind of stable of people that we can invite to focus groups. We have pretty sophisticated methodology to make sure we're not surveying the same people twice. We rely on third-party research at times. I think you have to have all of those tools in the toolkit to kind of triangulate on what's going on.
Absolutely. So this financial planning tool that you mentioned, how much is that informed by the data that you're grabbing and that you've seen even over the last 2 years, where many people, they went through things they weren't prepared for financially as well? So how did all this data inform how you built this interface and this platform?
Yeah, so it's informed it in two ways, and I would say one is like big data, and one is maybe like small data or anecdotal data, but still important data. So, from a big data perspective, we're always monitoring how our clients interact with our financial plan. Like, what pages are they spending longer on, shorter? How do they rate the understandability of various aspects of the financial planning software? So, we're constantly looking at that, and tweaking it and performing it, improving it. Could be colors, could be pie charts versus stacked bar charts, or any of that, just kind of in the weed stuff. So that's a big way in which we really look at it. But I think what's really powerful is, as I mentioned earlier, we have these advisors that are out there talking to clients. We can talk to them, and we can invite them into our offices and have them look at pages of our financial planning software, and they can offer their input and perspective. And often they'll have insights or just ways of looking at the data that are completely different than ours that can really lead to some amazing unlocks. So I think it's like the combination of big data and like human wisdom or like learned experience. You get that combination right, it's super powerful.
Christian, something that I think about a lot is financial literacy. There are a lot of people like me out in the world where I only learned about money when I had to, when I was living in the city that you're in, New York, with credit card debt and like no financial literacy. And then over time, as I got older, I got it. But I feel like today, young people really need to know financial literacy. They don't obviously teach it in schools. And I'm just curious what your approach is to make sure that all of your customers have some kind of financial literacy, no matter where they're at.
Oh man, I wish I had a great answer for you. I mean, this is one that I challenge my team on continually. I mean, we can look at every piece of data says that financial literacy is good. People that are financially literate have better financial outcomes. Surprise, surprise. They actually end up purchasing more, which is a good thing. And they're happier. They sleep better. We did,
Mm,
a study on like overall wellness, and people that are more financially literate just have less anxiety and are healthier. The $64,000 question is how you drive it. And we're trying. We don't have it cracked. I don't think anybody does, but we're trying lots of different things. Nudges within the financial planning software, articles, customized content. We're pulling out all the stops on it to try and crack it. But I think it's something that's just going to require kind of constant work. I think it is a place where I think social media can be a really corrosive influence, because a lot of social media, so I find, I mean, there's some amazing aspects of social media, but it can be so reductive. Like, just do
uh,
these 5 easy things and you'll be financially secure. Like, if you just forego a Starbucks a week, then you'll be able to retire
right.
early. Like, sounds nice, good clickbait, but I don't think it actually makes anybody more financially literate. So I think that in one sense, like, the job of driving financial literacy is getting harder.
That's so interesting. So actually, misinformation by coaches on social media actually is makes your work harder too, because anybody can say they're an expert, and that can be dangerous.
It can be really dangerous. And so I'll just pick on the, like, skip a cup of coffee every day and you'll retire earlier. Like, probably is good to maybe skip a cup of coffee and save those dollars. So it's like, that's not bad advice. It's just not enough. You
Right.
have to get beyond just these like top 10 like clickbaity things. But like driving financial security, it's nuanced, it's complex. You have to think about scenarios, you have to think about future earning and social security and tax and all of that. So if the coaches on social media need to bring that. I mean, and that's not quite as sexy, but they need to bring some more of that like full picture to truly help people manage their financial lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one thing that's close to my heart is just to help educate women, because I think sometimes girls are not educated as much as their brothers about these things. I certainly wasn't. And, it's really important that we educate girls and women so they can be more independent, self-sufficient. And I really want to ask you more about LearnVest, but I don't know if I know enough about it to ask you about it. But is this a platform for to help women?
So it was a really fascinating financial planning uh, fintech provider. Its roots were really around helping women. Um, Before we acquired them, they did expand their mission to more of like a mass market, but they always had a really, really strong user base. And LearnVest was started by an amazing female entrepreneur. She's now doing venture capital, Alexa Von Tobel. She's a great friend of mine, absolutely amazing. But I know, like, the idea of financial security for everyone, but women in particular, is really important for her. And I think we should all be really concerned about it, because not only is it just the right thing to do from a social justice perspective, you look at the data, women are going to be making the vast majority of financial decisions in most American households going forward. And so it just
Yeah.
behooves all of us to really make sure that women are well equipped to make those decisions.
Yeah, it's funny how even in my own house, like I buy everything. I make all the decisions in our house, but as far as our investments, like my husband kind of leads that. It's sort of this weird, but increasingly I'm trying to be more educated. I think I'm like a lot of other women where, I mean, not to stereotype, but you just learn as you go. But it would be nice if at a younger age there was some sort of operationalized way to make sure like every single young person understood like basic financial literacy.
Absolutely. There are a number of really interesting startups that are going after this. I'll name one that I would encourage people to check out is Goal Setter. Fabulous app for driving financial literacy for younger kids. Our family is a user of Goalsetter. Full fair disclosure, we are at Northwestern Mutual is an investor in Goalsetter. Um, a woman founded startup in Brooklyn. It's fabulous. I really love what they're doing. Do they have it completely figured out? No, but I think it's going to take lots of startups like Goalsetter to think about this, such that we can kind of crack this financial literacy thing for all audiences over the long term.
Well, thank you for that. I'm going to check that out. I think my daughter and I will do that together. My son is only 2, but maybe I'll get him on that as well. All right. Well, now, so my audience can get to know you a little bit better outside of your work, I wanted to do some rapid fire. Are you game? Are you ready?
Let's do it. Fire away.
All right, Christian, what did you eat for breakfast today?
I had a fruit cup on the airplane. Not very exciting.
Ah, okay. What's your idea of perfect happiness?
Perfect happiness for me is sailing on Lake Michigan, kind of like late August, sunset, perfect air temperature. That's my vision of happiness.
That sounds lovely. What is one mental strategy for managing hard days?
Mental strategy for managing hard days. Whenever I'm really in a tough situation, I like to remind myself of all of the hard days I faced in the past and got through. That this too shall
Mm-hmm.
pass. That I've already proven my ability to persevere, and in kind of revisiting some of those previous moments of triumph over stress, it gives me some additional energy.
What is your favorite type of vacation?
I really like active vacations. I can go sit on the beach for about 8 hours and then I get bored and want to do something. A vacation that's really going to stimulate me in all ways. Like I can be active physically, I can learn history or see art, I can eat amazing food, I get some time to relax, I can be with my family. So I really like, for me, the vacation has to have that like multidisciplinary element to it to really be wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds great. If you could have lunch with anyone dead or alive, who would it be?
Who would I want to have lunch with, dead or alive? Oh, that's a good question. Gosh, you should have given me that one in advance. My favorite poet is Walt Whitman.
Hmm.
Just super interesting. Very interesting life. Love his poetry. Great American poet. I would want to have lunch with Walt Whitman.
If you had to describe your outlook in one quick motto, what would it be?
Onward.
That's great.
Keep
I love
moving.
that.
That's what I tell my team. Keep moving forward. Persevere. Onward.
That's great. I like that. All right. Well, if people want to learn more about Northwestern Mutual or you, where can they do that?
So you can certainly go to our website. I'm on LinkedIn though, so if anybody really liked or disliked anything I said, reach out to me, send me a message via LinkedIn. Would love to connect.
All right, everybody, you've been listening to the Modern Customer Podcast. Until next time, thank you for tuning in.